Hello and welcome to episode 177 of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. Of course, I am your host, Rick Doherty. We have a very busy show for you today, so I want to get right to it. Later on, my wife Courtney will be here for a dining review of Storybook Dining with Snow White at Artist Point in Disney's Wilderness Lodge. But first, I'll be joined by Miranda from Pet Alliance of Greater Orlando. I've mentioned that my cat Lily passed away in March, and I wanted to do something to promote organizations that are helping animals in her honor. Miranda is the perfect guest for the show because she is also a former Walt Disney World cast member, and we will talk about that as well. Before we get started, make sure you're subscribed to the Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty YouTube channel. Take the time to like videos, watch videos, and add positive comments. That would all really help us. Let's welcome Miranda from Pet Alliance of Greater Orlando. Thanks for being here, Miranda.
Of course, thanks for having me.
So I want to get to everything that you do at Pet Alliance by the end of this episode, but where I would like to start is when I was setting this up, the people who work with you said that you happen to be quite the Disney fan, and I wanted to start there so maybe you could relate to some of our listeners a little more because that's our main focus over here. So why don't you talk a little bit about your Disney fandom, how much of a connection you have to Disney, and when that started?
I grew up in Central Florida, so as one does when you grow up in Central Florida, definitely visited the parks a lot when I was a kid. My background before working in Pet Alliance, actually, I used to work in zoological and environmental conservation education. So I always thought that it would be neat to be a part of Disney's conservation education team. And I ended up doing that for a little bit, working in the seas. If you've ever gotten off of like the Nemo ride and somebody's there with a biofact, or if you've been in a school group and somebody's instructed the school group, that's kind of what I did. So it was kind of neat to have like those two sides collide for a little bit in my life. But yeah, I still go to the parks as often as I can. If anybody is down to bring me with them, I'll always come along and eat and drink and ride rides and yeah.
What was that like working at the Seas? Because that is, people don't know it as much as they probably should. Like you talk about, yeah, you get off of the Nemo ride, and if you happen to pay attention and not rush to get to Soarin', you might skip the fact that there's this gigantic aquarium there that's one of the biggest in the country. And did you find that people appreciated that when you were there, that you did get a lot of people who maybe didn't know it was there, but once they found out it was there, would spend a lot of time?
Yeah, I definitely think that it was a surprise for quite a few people, which I didn't expect because I always knew that it was there. But again, growing up, Central Florida went there a lot. If it's your first time there, I can see how maybe you would stumble upon it and have no idea. And for a zoo nerd like me, I thought it was cool because it is, I believe, the second largest indoor aquarium in the country and in this part of the world. The biggest being the Georgia Aquarium in Atlanta, where I also worked in education. Um, and they've got so many different species of fish that you'd never see in other places, or rarely see in other places rather. And also they have bottlenose dolphins, and they do some pretty cool behavioral research there. So yeah, definitely spend some time, look around. There's always something new to see while you're there. And sometimes the educators will do some magical moments. So that was always fun too. You'd make somebody's day and show them something that they wouldn't normally get to see behind the scenes.
So what made you decide to pursue this field of work? I mean, first in zoological and now you're working with animals at Pet Alliance, but I think a lot of people really care for animals and they have pets and they love their pets. But what made that something that you wanted to, beyond your own pets, take care of animals and spread information about animals?
That's a really good question. I'm gonna try to keep this as condensed as possible because I kind of have a weird gateway into the animal field. I actually majored in a communications related studied field in college, and I never really considered working with animals. I grew up with horses and with, dogs and cats and a variety of other small animals. We had pigs for a while, we had goats, but I just had never thought like, oh, I want to do this as a career. And I think like back then too, it was very much like, well, I don't want to be a vet, so I guess I can't work with animals. And growing up, like I really enjoyed visiting zoos and I would see the keepers working and be like, oh, that would be a cool job, but I don't know, I'm not very scientifically inclined. Maybe that's not my thing. And the universe has a tendency to put you where you belong. So, long story short, I graduated college and actually ended up in an internship working with bottlenose dolphins and sea lions and a couple other marine mammals. And I did a few other zoological internships before I landed in zoo education, which I thought was nice because I really liked to kind of bring the knowledge that I had learned to people out in the public, which you don't always get to do when you're working behind the scenes with the animals. And I thought that was a good fit. And then COVID happened, and long story short, I ended up at Pet Alliance working in their animal care department. And that was kind of neat because I had acquired all of this knowledge about zoo animal welfare and working with those animals and the problems that their counterparts face in the wild and how we can help. And then there was this whole new world now that I had been exposed to with shelter animals and the plights that face the pets in our own homes, which I had never been exposed to before. And I just think it's super interesting. I feel like I absorb this stuff like a sponge. So any kind of animal topics just stick with me. And I think that they're fascinating. And I just love sharing them with other people. Like it's this mysterious world, even with cats and dogs in your own home that you might not realize, what their needs are or things that you can do to make their lives better, in your house or medical things like that can be kind of scary and daunting. So now that I work in marketing for the shelter, it's kind of full circle because I'm back to communicating all of that mysterious information that you might not know about to the general public. So I think that this has been kind of a nice coming back, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely makes sense. And I wanted to reach out to you. I've said it a number of times on the podcast. We recently, earlier this year, lost our cat Lily, and we're not ready to adopt another cat yet. So I wanted to figure out like what I could do to sort of pay tribute to her and spread some good information. So one of the things I did was reach out to you. So at Pet Alliance, what are you doing to help animals? Because I would imagine Orlando is a very specific situation where you have a lot of people who are, I don't want to say transient, but move around a lot, who might make impulse decisions for where they're going to live. And then maybe they get an animal and they realize they can't take care of that animal. What are some of the reasons that Pet Alliance exists, and what do you do to, like I said, help animals?
Yeah, so we are Central Florida's largest nonprofit animal welfare organization. So we do work in tandem with the county shelters that your tax dollars pay for. It's all big one collective. We're all trying to help. There are also other rescues in the area that we work with. We're just the biggest in the nonprofit sector. So we currently have two locations, one that is in Sanford, that is cats and dogs, one that is in downtown Orlando that is a temporary space that currently only houses cats. And then we are building a brand new state-of-the-art facility off of John Young Parkway by the Orange County Jail that will hopefully be open mid next year. So we're always growing. And the main piece of what we do is sheltering. So we only take in owner surrenders. So people who are in the community that cannot take care of their cat or dog anymore. We also will do transfers from other shelters. So if there are animals that are adoptable, but maybe in situations where there aren't a lot of like adoption candidates, people that are looking to adopt pets, we can transfer those animals in from other parts of the state or even other parts of the country. We do a lot of work with shelters in the Caribbean. So St. Croix, Grand Cayman, there are a lot of stray dogs out there that have puppies and not enough homes to take in all of those animals on those limited populations. So we get quite a few dogs from them because Orlando always looking for those puppies. And we usually find them homes very quickly. Um, Another part of what we do is also clinics. So we have a veterinary clinic in Sanford and also a satellite clinic out in Alafaya for owned pets. So we provide a affordable veterinary care option in Central Florida. We do preventative wellness checks. So your dog comes in and needs exams, just a general wellness exam, updated vaccinations, things like that. We have a couple other specialized services that we do, but it's a lot of preventative medicine mostly. We can provide, flea and tick prevention and all of that stuff too. And we do spay neuters over at our LFA clinic that are usually considerably cheaper than some of the private practices in the area. So we like to be able to give folks the option to get those services at an affordable price. Um, and we have a bunch of community programs. We have a pet food pantry. We do community cat trap, neuter, vaccinate, return program. That's done over 15,000 animals since 2018 to try to keep that wild cat population down in the Central Florida area. So lots of different stuff going on around here.
And do the unusual circumstances of Orlando play a big part in how many pets you get, how many pets you have to help at the veterinary clinic at an affordable price? Because maybe you do have a lot of people who are Universal team members or Disney cast members. I mean, Disney's the biggest employer in the state or something like that. And you find that people maybe come down here, whether it's to live closer to the theme parks or to work at the theme parks, and they're bringing our pets are part of our family. So, they're bringing animals down with them, and sometimes maybe they can't take care of them, or sometimes older people move down to Florida and maybe they start to have a problem taking care of their pets. So, do you find there are Orlando specific issues that you have to deal with at Pet Alliance? Or, as somebody who's lived most of her life in the Orlando area, are you unaware of the issues other places might deal with on a regular basis?
Good question. So I don't know necessarily that we experience unique issues in animal sheltering here in Central Florida versus other parts of the country. Because a lot of the causes that may lead people to have to like relinquish their pets to a shelter, are very similar across the board. Um, Housing related issues have been a large one since COVID hit. When I started in the shelter, kind of in the middle of the quarantine era of COVID, there were quite a few people that unfortunately were in a position where they had lost their jobs or had been furloughed or just couldn't take care of their animal anymore, were losing their housing situation, maybe had to move in with a relative that was allergic to their pet. And I'm grateful that we were able to give, those animals somewhere to go and start over. But housing and the affordability of living in the area, unfortunately, not only impacts the people that live in our community, but also by extension, their pets. And I think that that's something that unfortunately is going on across the country, just with rising costs and housing availability and things like that. We also do get pets occasionally from people who maybe have like a health related issue or something that's happening with a family member got sick and they need to find a place to put their dog. We have a program for older people who they can basically set it up ahead of time with us where when they pass away, we will take their animals and make sure that they are fed, watered, sheltered until we find them a new home. So we can give people that peace of mind as they get older that their pets will be taken care of. So we have kind of like the systems at least set up to help these people that are in these predicaments.
And you briefly mentioned a pet pantry. And I know back when I lived in Pennsylvania, I volunteered for a pet pantry. And that's actually a unique experience as well, because I think there are a lot of things that you don't think of when it comes to providing food for animals. Like, you have to mix all the different kinds because you can't guarantee that you're going to have that one kind, and you can't let the animals get used to having this particular type of food. So there's a real science behind how you do that.
Yeah, our pet food pantry, it's actually my favorite community program. I think that it's really cool that we're able to do this for people because I think if you talk to like anybody from any shelter, surrender prevention is the goal. We don't want to have to take somebody's pet. And if the only thing between like you having to surrender your pet to us and, you keeping your pet is, hey, I lost my job, I'm trying to get back on my feet. I just need to feed my pet for a couple of weeks and we can help with that, we will. Um, with that program, though, it's completely based off of donations from our community. And people have been very generous in what they've given us to be able to help people feed their pets. So sometimes we don't always have like every brand or every flavor, or, we don't have prescription stuff. But at the end of the day, like we got to get these animals fed. So as long as we're able to do something, and hopefully, again, this would be like a temporary in between situation, we can provide at least something to keep those pets from going hungry.
And if somebody is listening to this and they're in the Orlando area and they want to help out, like maybe they don't have a lot of time, but they do live in the area, they love the theme parks, so they listen to the show, but they're trying to figure out how they can just do a little more, feel a little more part of a community, because Orlando is an area where people move from all over the place. And sometimes the quickest way to meet people and to sort of develop that sense that you are a part of your new community is to volunteer, is to get out there. How can people help? What are the different things that are needed at Pet Alliance?
Yeah, we've got so much stuff you can do if you want to get involved. We do have a very robust volunteer program. So of course we have volunteers that help us in the shelters. We have cat volunteers at that downtown Orlando location and in Sanford that come in and give our cats attention and make sure everybody, has water and has enrichment. And also helps these cats find their potential adopters. We also have dog volunteers that do the same thing up in Sanford. And of course, both of those positions will exist in the future in that new shelter that's coming as well, if that's a little bit closer. I know Sanford's kind of far for folks that live in South Orlando. So that's an option that you always have. All of the information is on our website, petallianceorlando.org, for volunteering. The other kind of branch of our volunteer program that's even larger is our foster database. So we, especially this time of year, because it's summer and we can kind of get into what this means. It's kitten season. Those stray cats that you see running around outside in your neighborhoods, they're all having babies right now. And while we have that program that exists to trap, neuter, vaccinate, return those cats so they stop having babies, while we catch up with the population doing that, there's still hundreds of kittens, thousands of kittens that are born in this area every summer, and they all end up in the local shelters. And then we have to raise those kittens to be 8 weeks old and then find them their future adopters. Now, while those kittens are growing up, especially sometimes they do come in without moms. They need to go somewhere. They can't just sit in the shelter. We don't have the space. They could get sick because the velocity of animals coming in. It's much better to have them in a home during that time. So our fosters are essential for that because there are only so many staff members, like we can't all take them home, unfortunately. So our fosters come and they pick those kittens up and they have them in their house from anywhere from, 1 week to 8 weeks, just until they're big enough. If they have any minor medical issues, they can recover safely in a home, and our staff can help with that and provide the medication needed. So if you don't want to have to drive to the shelter all the time and you just want to do something at your house, that is an incredible way to help. I know some people are probably listening like, I'm not a cat person. We also need dog fosters. So it's not as big of a demand because we don't have obviously big roaming stray dog populations in the Orlando area. So we don't have as many like puppies coming into the shelter, but it does happen. We need places for those puppies to go. Also, our adult dogs, sometimes our long-term residents need a break from the shelter environment. They can go into a foster home. If we have a dog that's recovering from a surgery or a medical condition, they can go into a foster home. So any age, any, cat or dog, you would probably be able to find animals that you would want to work with in that foster program. And our foster coordinators can set all of that up for you. So the information for that's also on our website. And if you're like, I don't have time to do any of this stuff, but you still want to help out, there's a wish list of items on our website as well. Especially like I said, with it being kitten season this time of year, wet kitten food. Those kittens eat a lot all the time. They're like human babies, so we're constantly in need of wet kitten food. Dry pet food of any variety for that pet food pantry, we can always accept any kind of like used towels, gently used toys for pets, we can take all of that as well. So again, all info on the website.
Excellent information. I know there's this is going to sound weird, but there's an old monk quote that appears in some television shows that I've watched, and it sounds religious, but it's not going to be religious. And the quote is, I don't know if what I do pleases you, Lord. I know the fact that I want to please you pleases you. And sometimes we get put in situations where we don't know how we can help. Like, I lost my cat and it was emotional for me. And I don't know what I could do to put positive vibes into the world because of that. So I figured that I have this platform. We get a couple thousand people listening to every episode. So if I could just give somebody a platform to talk about how they're helping animals, that's something that I could do. I don't know if it will make any difference, but the fact that I tried, I think at least is putting some positive vibes into the world. So Miranda from Pet Alliance, one more time, give everybody the website, and thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Yeah, we just love taking the opportunity to tell folks about what we do. And if you are inspired to take any kind of action, to better the lives of the cats and dogs in our community, thank you. Also, one more thing I want to add is if you're like, oh, I do want to volunteer, I want to come walk dogs, but that Sanford shelter is so far away, Orange County Animal Services is a lot closer and they need your help too. So if you think that we're too far away, or maybe you're listening out of the state, look up your local cat and dog, specific shelters, and see what they can do for you for volunteering or what they need. Because we're one big network, we're all working together. So they need your help just as much as we do. But again, our information, petallianceorlando.org. That is our main website. We also have every social media under the sun at Pet Alliance GO. So you can find us there as well.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Thanks so much for having me. And thanks for caring about the cats and dogs.
Now I want to turn things around quickly and bring my wife Courtney back on the show. Thanks for being here, Court.
Thanks for having me, Rick.
So today we're going to do a dining review from a recent visit to Storybook Dining at Artist Point with Snow White. Before we get started, I just wanted to make a couple notes. First of all, I have a video dining review from this trip that you can see on the Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty YouTube channel. It was posted on May 27th. So if you want to see some of these meals, some of these food items, and of course, some of the character interactions, make sure to go to May 27th on the Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty YouTube channel. Another note that I want to make is actually at the beginning of 2022, Courtney and I also ate at Storybook Dining at Artist Point with Snow White, and we tried different food items both trips. So we're going to get to do a little bit of contrasting and comparing when it comes to some of those items. First things first, as of this recording, Artist Point dining pricing is $65 per adult plus tax and gratuity, $39 per child plus tax and gratuity. This is a dinner-only experience, and reservations used to be pretty tough to acquire, but I've noticed that especially some of the later reservations, like 8:30, 9 o'clock, 9:30, are starting to be available at a more regular basis. This is a prefix menu. It starts with "And So the Story Begins," the shared appetizers. This is wild mushroom bisque, Hunter's Pie, which is turkey and chicken, cranberry preserve, and crispy sauerkraut, and Wicked Shrimp Cocktail, Bloody Mary vinaigrette, seaweed salad, and spiced house-made seasoning. So obviously as a vegetarian, I was only able to have one of these. I had the wild mushroom bisque, and this was probably the highlight of the entire meal. It was so good, extremely powerful with the flavors, like almost too flavorful. I know that's a word that Courtney uses a lot, but it really was like thick, and it really just was packed with a ton of flavor. I really, really liked this. Very rich, and I would say the highlight of the appetizers. But Courtney, you were able to have the Hunter's Pie and the Wicked Shrimp Cocktail. What did you think of those?
Yeah, so they were good. I would say nothing in particular very special, especially compared to that wild mushroom bisque, but definitely good. I like it on point with the theming and, giving you something, a little different.
Then we're going to move on to the entrees. This is the core of the story entrees. You just choose one of these. There's cottage beef stroganoff, tender beef, preserved vegetables, spatzel, mushrooms, and aged cow's milk cheese. The royal prime rib roast, which is horseradish mashed potatoes on the side with carrots and jus. A stroll through nature, asparagus, leeks, arugula, gnocchi, sage, and parmesan. This was featured in delicious Disney, Walt Disney World recipes and stories from the most magical place on earth. So I got this item. If you think my description sounds good and you want to make it for yourself, you can pick up that book. The Magic Mirrors Slow Braised Pork Shank, Polenta, and Gastrique. There's the Brothers Grimm Herb Chicken, Cauliflower Puree, Roasted Vegetables, and Chicken Jus. Bashful's Sustainable Fish with Herbed Risotto and Gremolata. And the Sorceress Spell of Trickin' Chicken, Cauliflower Puree, Roasted Vegetables, and Vegetable Jus. That is the plant-based option, 100% plant-based. The Stroll Through Nature is vegetarian. So, Courtney, you got the Magic Mirrors Slow Braised Pork Shank on the advice of our friend from back in Pennsylvania, Melinda. But the past time you went, you got the Royal Prime Rib Roast. So why don't you talk about both of these items and sort of compare and contrast why you were either happy that you changed or that you wish you would have gone with the same thing?
Okay, so the Royal Prime Rib Roast I had gotten the first time, and I did really like it. I think it was made very well, certainly very flavorful, a great portion, and it actually came with some kind of a bread that would be described, I think, as almost a Yorkshire pudding. I'm not exactly sure. It was a little bit different, and again, it was very, very good. But I think that so many different things sounded good that I certainly didn't mind trying something different. And I had this recommendation about the pork shank. And with polenta too, and that's something I like. I don't get to have all of the time. So I was happy to try this, and I really, really did like it. I would get it again, but I would also get the prime rib roast again too. I think both are very, very good. Again, well made. Kind of in keeping with the theming of something being forest-like, falling off the bone, something you can savor every bite.
And I guess that first time I almost talked Courtney into getting the Royal Prime Rib Roast because I figured, I'm one of those people who's like, if we're paying a flat rate, let's get the most expensive item because that's getting your money's worth, right? But I do think that Courtney really liked this pork shank, and maybe I should have let her order it the first time. Not that I didn't let her, but I just suggested the prime rib roast, and I think that she listened to that suggestion, and maybe she would have enjoyed the pork shank more. But in the long run, we got to try both of them, and we got to let you know twice as many items because we both got different things. The first time I went, I got the Sorceress Spell of Trickin' Chicken, and this was really, really good. The fake chicken actually tasted like chicken. My only problem with it was a very, very small portion. I think if they gave you 2 cuts of that fake chicken, which can't cost that much, honestly, Disney, like, really, you're already ripping off vegetarians with a prefix menu. You could at least give 2 slices of the Trickin' Chicken. So it was good, but I really felt hungry leaving the restaurant the first time, which you shouldn't when you're paying $65 per person. This time I got the Stroll Through Nature, and this was very, very good. I still think Disney is making a lot of money off vegetarians because we don't get that protein that is the most expensive part of any meal. But it was a big enough bowl of pasta that if I really savored it, which I tried to do that this time, it felt a little more filling, and I didn't leave thinking, boy, I need to eat something right away. I didn't have enough for this meal. So I will say the Stroll Through Nature was a good choice. It was seasoned very well. Like, they definitely made the flavors pop. Not necessarily a big vegetable guy, even though I'm a vegetarian, but the way that they seasoned the vegetables, the way that they cooked them, made it a more interesting dish, and I did really enjoy it. Is it worth $65? No, but then we have to incorporate the character interactions and some of the other things which you do take into consideration at these meals. The Sweet Endings shared dessert. Now, Courtney and I got completely different desserts because I can't have gelatin because of being a vegetarian, and there's horse in gelatin. So she got the Miner's Treasures, cookies and cream, panna cotta, and chocolate gems, the Fairy Tale Gooseberry Tart, meringue and gooseberry, and the Poison Apple, a dark chocolate apple mousse with a sour center. And then we did get the Hunter's Gift to the Queen, which was really cool. They had a smoking box, and the server opened up the box, and there were 2 little chocolate hearts in there. That was really fun. A really good presentation. Like I said, you can see the video on May 27th on the Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty YouTube channel. And I got 3 desserts that were all sort of replicating those 3 desserts, but they didn't have any gelatin in them. Mine were fine. They weren't the best desserts in the world, but they did what they could. And I appreciate that they do have options for people who can't have gelatin, for people who are vegetarians. But Courtney, you had the main desserts, the desserts that most of our listeners will have if they do Storybook Dining. So why don't you talk about them?
Yeah, I really like these, and I think most people will. I think that for some people, the gooseberry, they say, is strange and maybe a little too tart, but I really liked it. And then the poison apple was just perfect. It was light enough and a balance of sour and sweet, not too much of either. And the Miner's Treasure was just great, like a light kind of cookies and cream flavor. And they were, just a few bites each, which was the perfect way to top off the meal.
And then just quickly, I want to end this by talking about the character interactions. The last time we went, it wasn't that long after this restaurant reopened from the pandemic closures. So there was still an element of social distancing with the characters, and you didn't necessarily get like the full experience. I know that looking back at some of the photos, Snow White is standing behind Courtney so that I can see both of them in the photo, but they're definitely keeping a little bit of distance. This time, that wasn't the case. We had amazing interactions with Snow White, Grumpy, Dopey, and then you get an invitation to meet with the evil queen. This was a big part of why Courtney wanted to do this meal. I think she loves especially interacting with Snow White. She's one of her favorite characters. They really did a good job of making sure everybody had time with all of the characters. They came around, they're like, okay, did you meet Snow White? Did you meet Dopey? Did you meet Grumpy? And then, of course, they came with the invitation for the Evil Queen. So what did you think about these interactions, specifically because I think that's one of the main reasons you wanted to do this meal?
So the interactions this time were different than before, but I still had a great time before. I do remember the first time they were doing a lot more of like dancing. So they have that little like silly song that they do with Snow White and Dopey and Grumpy. And this time they didn't do that as much. And you and I were talking about it, and we said actually the first time probably it was overkill and it was a little too much. And the characters did come around a few times at least, even though they were distanced. So this time, I guess it felt like they're resetting. They're getting a little bit back to normal. And the strategy that they did still worked well. And again, the character interactions are fantastic. You know, the Evil Queen is so funny with how, you know, mean she is and sarcastic she is, really sarcastic. Myself, I just personally like Snow White so much, and she is everything you want her to be, and the dwarves are everything you want them to be. They do plan it well, and you get to have the time with them.
Thank you so much, Courtney. As we end this segment, I just want to ask you, do you think it was worth it at the $65 a person price point?
Okay, being completely honest, it may be a little too expensive. I think for us, especially me, as a special treat and as someone who loves Snow White, it was great. But the portions you get and the type of food you get, even though it's great, it's made very, very well, maybe it's a little bit pricey. And yes, you're incorporating in that price the atmosphere, the theming, the character interactions especially, and the service, which are all there, but it might be a tiny bit pricey.
This has been episode 177 of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. I will be back with a brand new episode next Thursday. Until then, have a great week.